My guest in the Nimataion today is Seán Pádraig O'Donoghue, and together we are spinning a yarn. Seán, you're a poet, herbalist, teacher, priest, and thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So, Seán, what has been your favorite childhood story?
Well, I've been reflecting so much about that over the past day, um, because there are so many. But really, to me, it was the changeling mythology that began to make the world make a different kind of sense for me, because I arrived feeling like I didn't quite belong in the culture I was born into. And being a precocious child, when I was 8 or 9, I pulled my mother's copy of the selected poems of William Butler Yeats off the shelf and opened to The Stolen Child. And when I came to that poem and to its refrain that many will know, but I will repeat, come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. All of a sudden, so much made sense to me in a way that it never had fully before.
Hmm, that a shiver is running down my body right now. It's this feeling of being touched by the other world, albeit very briefly. I think that is expressed so perfectly in poetry, and you just conveyed that.
Mm.
So did you did you see yourself as an elf or some other being? How did you or did you play it out in some way, or what did you do with it?
Well, I didn't know quite who or what I was, and of course, neither did anybody else. I was being sent to all manner of specialists to try to figure out why I was so precociously skilled in some areas and so very challenged in others. This was the early 80s, so there was not much of a framework of understanding neurodivergence, except that all the adults figured out that, this is a very strange child, and we need to try to figure out what's going on. Um, and that fit my sense of things, and also that sense of the world being more full of weeping than we could understand was with me as long as I can remember. And I became very aware of ecological catastrophe and of nuclear war at a very young age. And so it didn't make any sense to me that people were doing these things. And so there had to be somewhere else that people, that the beings weren't doing these things. And also, I would spend a lot of time. My parents lived at the edge of the suburbs, and behind the house there was a wooded swamp. And I'd spend a lot of time wandering about there. And every once in a while, there'd be a sort of glimmer out of the corner of my eye, just outside my full field of vision, a sort of silvery shimmering. And I didn't know what that was, but I knew it had something to do with home. And so when I pulled that book off the shelf, Yeats' words gave so much context to that, and then informed so much of what else I would discover. It was a few months later that I began reading Tolkien, and indeed, the elves made sense to me, um, both in terms of their presence in Middle Earth, but also in terms of their impending departure. It felt like, oh, okay, yep, I missed the ship.
Yeah, and it's a curious thing, isn't it, that the elves or this kind of otherworldly beings, they're always associated with silver. as I said, the silvery shimmer, or in Welsh
Yeah.
mythology, it's always this sounding of a silvery bell that announces the approach of the other. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that we have in it the reflection of moonlight. We
Mm,
also have in it the quality of light in the forest at twilight, just after the golden light has faded and before the darkness comes. And I think that there's so much liminality in that. And of course, certain light shining on certain reeds and rushes covered with rain can bring that as well. As will the bottoms of the mugwort leaves when the wind blows through them and reveals them. And so I
mm,
think it's that sense that so much that brings us to those physically and temporally liminal places opens different kinds and different depths of liminality as well.
mm,
Of course, when it comes to silver, we have in the Irish tradition the silver branch of Manannán mac Lir, which, when grasped, allows that vision into the well and the other world where our waters have their source.
mm. Yeah, and you mentioned mugwort. That is one of those herbs that is traditionally used to open the pathway to the other world, or to ease the transition. Um, so when you found this connection or this sense of being home there, and or being stranded here, whatever, um, what did you do with it? So one could feel just being homesick and desperate, but I suppose you transmuted it into poetry, beauty, as one does, isn't it?
Yeah, in a sense, I did. Although poetry preceded that knowing for me. And it's funny because in some ways I think of poetry as my first language
Mm.
because the modern English that I was surrounded by never captured or described anything of my experience accurately. So I had to turn it around into different shapes and use rhythm and intonation in order to give any semblance of meaning to it. Um, and of course, every time people thought I was being metaphorical, I was being literal, and everything others were treating as literal, I took as metaphorical. So definitely poetry became an important part of it, and reading deeply, both reading um, a great deal of fantasy, but also reading a great deal of history, trying to find, okay, I think there was also some point in human history that made some different sense. How can I find that became important for me.
Mm.
And then for a time, from about the age of 14 until my mid 30s, activism became my complete passion and devotion, um, until the world began shimmering again and the plants found me anew.
That's that's so well put. And do you have a notion of how this story is going to carry you onwards? How will it guide you through life from now on?
Well, it's interesting. For so long, I treated it purely as a story of exile and just felt deeply in the grief of it. However, I've had a different insight over the past few years of understanding that what we treated from this world can also return to this world, and about those liminal places of departure, like the Brew and She in the Irish tradition, the ancient mounds, and also the deep waters, also exist within us. So our heart is a chamber with deep hidden dimensions. The waters of our body are deep waters. And while I think that what departed the world in some sense went into another depth of reality that can be marked by its proximity to those places of departure that the myths refer to, there's also the way in which those same hollow hills within us can have doors that can open, and that we're in a time when we can invite in each other that returning and ally with the other world in what it needs to bring back. And especially because I feel like, well, John Moriarty would speak of how this world and the other world are both part of the one great world. And I feel like what's happening in this world right now is rippling through all worlds with an intensity that it hasn't for a while. And so, for both our world and the other world, the only solution lies in that reweaving.
Yeah, yeah. The only way out is through.
Yes.
Yeah. Sean, thank you so much for reminding us of these liminal places inside and outside of us. Thank you for being here. And it's been a pleasure and an honor. And I look forward to talk with you again.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all that you're doing to reawaken the memory and magic for so many.
Thank you. The world is magical.